Well, welcome to another Friday night. And what we've been talking about was healthy tools for recovery. What do I need? What are healthy tools for living? What are healthy tools for meeting my 12 needs that I have? And that was the series. And so we've been working through the 12 needs and looking at how do I meet this need in a healthy way. And so tonight I want to come to our need for rest, but also for work. The blend of the two needs that seem to be opposite of each other, but both are necessary. And so what I want to do is just start by talking about work and then showing how complex trauma affects that, and then talk about rest and how complex trauma affects that. And hopefully it'll be a very helpful thing for you in giving you tools for a healthy life. So the subject of work, where I want to start was what would it look like in a healthy home? How would a child learn about work and learn how to meet that need in a healthy way? And so if you look at any child, you quickly realize that they have tons of energy. And that energy goes into exploring, learning, trying new things, playing, and it's developing skills. It's figuring out what they're good at. And so children don't, as young, get some responsibilities, but there's all kinds of free time where they can just play and explore. And so that's built into us, is this energy that wants to have an output for that energy, to do something, to accomplish something. And so within that, a healthy family, what the child will then see is parents who have a balance of work and rest. And they will be role models to the child, so the child will see parents who work very hard, who have a good attitude towards work, and they balance all of the different responsibilities. So it's not that one responsibility gets their attention and others get neglected. It's a careful setting boundaries, saying no to doing too much, so that you can fulfill the responsibilities of your life well, all of them. And so the parents, as the child gets older, begin to give them responsibilities. They empty the dishwasher, they clear the table, they clean their room, they have a chore to do. And the child takes on responsibilities. And as they do that, the parent is validating them, thanking them, giving them appropriate feedback, and the child is learning. And the child is learning what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, what they're good at, what they're not so good at. And so by the time they get into their teens, late teens, they start to have a direction in their mind of what they want to do with their life, what they think will be a career that will be fulfilling for them. And so they transition into that and live on their own. So that's the healthy design for how a child learns to work. But enter complex trauma. Complex trauma, we don't often see how it damages this need for work, but it can do a lot of damage. And so let me just outline some of those things. For many people who grew up in complex trauma, life is always difficult, hard. It's full of negative emotions, frustration, pain, anger. And they resent anything that gives similar motive or similar emotions. And so when they get to work and they find hard, difficult days, frustration, they go, work's terrible. I want nothing to do with work. I'm done with that kind of living. And they head in the direction of just being lazy or looking for a quick buck, crime. So they get involved in dealing or boosting or turning tricks, all of those different things to just make quick money. And that becomes their thing, but it all comes out of complex trauma and their view towards work. For some growing up in complex trauma, they were given jobs to do as forms of punishment for doing something wrong. And so work was seen as a punishment. Other children were basically slaves within their complex trauma family. Mom and dad had kids, so the kids could do the work. And mom and dad could do whatever they wanted. And so work was a form of slavery for them. And then they didn't get validated for their work. They were criticized or got zero validation at all. Or they lived in families where work was the only thing they got validation for. That was the only thing that they were praised for. And so it gave them an identity, a sense of value from being able to work hard or perform. Some didn't get validation at home for work, but when they went to school and to friends' houses, they got validated for the stuff they did to help out. And so they got more validation outside the home than inside the home, and work was what got them that validation. Some grow up in complex trauma and they are afraid to say no. They're afraid that if they say no, you won't like me. And so they say yes to everybody, and now they get a job and they can't say no to the boss, and the boss thinks they're a wonderful employee because they do so much. Meanwhile, the person is burning out. Some, as they lived in this kind of slavery of work as a child, they developed this fantasy of a perfect job out there somewhere where there'd be no frustration. They'd always be fulfilled. It would never be boring. And so they played this fantasy that if they just looked hard enough, they would find this perfect job. Some people coming out of complex trauma are great workers. They just can't get along with any of the people they work with. And so they don't have the people skills to be able to be part of a team. And so that gets in the way all the time within their job situation. And of course, many, if work becomes what gives them validation, they become a workaholic. Or if work became a way to escape all the pain just by being a distraction, they can become a workaholic. And so for many people from complex trauma, they end up looking like the best employees in a company because they are workaholics. And it's the underlying pain and the underlying emptiness and lack of validation that is driving them. And then some, when they get on a job, they continually, if they're from complex trauma, get drawn into the work drama, the office drama. And so whenever anybody's whispering about something, they're right in there. And they're just feeding that gossip and all of the drama within a work setting. Many from complex trauma are fantastic workers for the first couple weeks. And then they're terrible workers because they're bored and their job they don't even enjoy anymore. Some were great when the boss is around, but when the boss is away, the mice play. And they are very lazy. They are very irresponsible. So they need constant surveillance, constant accountability for them to work well. They don't have good internal boundaries that keep them working well even when nobody's watching. And then some within a work setting from complex trauma don't do well with criticism. It shatters them. It gets them very angry. It makes them want to quit. Others from complex trauma, they're so used to looking for danger and negative that when they get on a job, they get fixated on the problems, the negatives of the job. And it might be a great job 90% of the time, but they focus on the 10% that is not perfect. And pretty soon they think the whole job is terrible. And then many, when they start a new job, have to learn new skills. And new skills mean you don't do it perfectly the first time. You have to learn. And so it's kind of like learning to walk. You stumble a bit. You don't do a great job right up front. And so a lot from complex trauma, if they can't do it perfectly in the first day, they think they're a failure and they want to quit. If the first couple of weeks are just learning new skills that feel awkward and weird, they want to quit because they want to do it perfectly and on the first day. And then many, sadly, got into drugs and alcohol in their teens And so because of that, they just have never been able to get a good job. They never were able to pursue the career that they were dreaming of as a kid. And then so they have to get minimum wage jobs, which to them are just frustrating dead-end jobs. And so there's no enjoyment in it for them, but that's what their addiction resulted in. And for some, if they're in addiction in their teens and on, they now could be in their 40s, but they don't even know what they're good at. They haven't been trying different things to figure out what they'd be good at. And so they're starting from scratch in their 40s, learning their skill set, and that can be extremely difficult. So I hope you see that complex trauma just took this whole work need and messed it up in a whole bunch of different ways. So let me go to rest. I think if you stop and just ponder or think about it, you realize there's kind of 5 types of rest that all of us desire. It's somehow built into us, a longing for this type of rest. So the first is we have a need for physical rest. And so every day we go to bed at night because we need sleep if we're going to function. And then we look forward to having a weekend off or the couple days off in a week just to be able to relax and get away from the stresses of the job. And then we look forward to holidays or vacations as further opportunity to rest and get away from the stresses. And so there's something in us that we realize early needs physical rest, wants physical rest, but it doesn't end there. We have a longing for emotional rest. And what I mean by that is we would love to be in a place where we are emotionally at peace, where there's no conflicting emotions, there's no negative emotions that need to be resolved. There's just this contentment. That's emotional rest. And then circumstantial rest. We love to have times where there's no problems, no difficulties, no drama that we have to deal with, where everything just goes smoothly. Everything just goes the way we would like it to go. Those we long for. And then spiritual rest. And what I mean by that is we long to be free of guilt, where we don't have a conscience that's troubled, where we feel a connection to God and we're just at peace in that relationship. And then the 5th one is we long for relational rest. We want times where our relationships are free of conflict, free of tension, free of resentments and unresolved hurts, where there's just an openness, a trust. Our hearts are wide open to the other person. That is something we long for. Now, within relationship rest, there's also the relationship with myself. And I think we long to be at peace with ourselves so that we feel content with who we are and where we're at. So all of that is built into us. This longing to work, but longing to rest. Need to work, need to rest. That both are built into us. Now let's bring in complex trauma and see what happens to rest. It messes it up just as much as it messed up work. So some of you grew up in a home where you were made to feel that if you ever took a break, if you ever took time to just relax and rest, you were being lazy or you were being selfish. And so you kind of got punished for resting. Some of you were told that idle hands are the devil's workshop. Or the devil never takes a holiday, so why should you? Or if you like Big Bang Theory, Sheldon says, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. And so some of you today, if you relax, you feel guilty. You feel that you're being lazy or selfish. That's how deeply that was driven into you. And then with that, some of you grew up in families where work ethic was emphasized all the time, that you were a hard worker, you worked long hours, and it kind of supported the mindset that justified being a workaholic. And it was said, oh, I just have a very good work ethic. Some people grew up seeing work, like we just said, as being difficult. It took the fun out of life. It was something you had to do to pay the bills. And so rest, well, that was the weekend. And that was the happy time. And so you worked hard in the week, not because you enjoyed it, but to pay for the party on the weekend. And so weekends, rest was celebration, party time. Work is bad. Work is draining. Work is just difficult. And so we have a culture now that's looking to retire early so that they can just have years of rest. And so rest, freedom from work is seen as a wonderful way to be able to exist. So that, again, complex trauma has messed up rest and our thinking about rest. Now let me just bring this into recovery. So a person has complex trauma. They now are beginning to heal. They're beginning to change and beginning to grow. Work and rest, distortions from complex trauma, can mess up your recovery. So let me just give you some for rest. Do you realize that for many from complex trauma, when they come into recovery, rest, a day to rest can be a trigger. Some, their mind goes, hey, party time, free time, and they go back to that mindset. Others, when there's a day of rest, they go, I'm getting nervous, things are way too quiet. There needs to be some drama because I think the other shoe's about to drop. And so they can sabotage their recovery on days of rest. And then some on their day of rest say, I think I'm going to find a new hobby. And they find a hobby that they like and they go, great, I just found something that's fantastic. And like a good addict, they now do it 110% and they ignore all their other responsibilities. They get out of balance very quickly. And then some, on a day of rest, they go, I'm bored. And that triggers a whole bunch of things. And then there's some, when they rest, they feel guilty. And they say, I don't deserve this. I should be working hard. I should be making up for all the mistakes I've made in my life. So let's just sabotage this, or let's just push, work until we burn out. And that happens. Okay, so let me give you a perspective to bring together different ideas about rest that I hope will help you. So I said that there's 5 rest needs, and something in us longs for those needs to be met. Think of complex trauma. Complex trauma is a world where you get no rest because you're always in danger. You're always on guard. You can't fully relax. But something in you longs for a break from the danger, longs to be able to let your guard down. So take the word ecstasy. The word ecstasy we often use in terms of addiction as kind of just the ultimate in pleasure. But the word ecstasy means to be taken out of. So what we're saying is, I want to have these problems and work hard and deal with life and give of myself, but then I want to have time to be taken out of that, away from the stress and pressures of life just for a while so I can go back and function well again. So what happens in complex trauma is the child gets no break. It's constant work, it's constant stress, it's constant fear. They long to be taken out of that. They long for ecstasy, though they don't necessarily know that term. And so, because they don't know healthy tools to get taken out of all the stress, and they don't have an opportunity to get taken out of that stress because they're too little. As soon as they find drugs, drugs takes them out of the stress, the pain, the emptiness of their life. And they go, I have finally found something that gives me a break, that gives me rest. So what I want you to see is that their desire was right, but how they met that desire was unhealthy. So they desired to be taken out of, they just used the wrong tool to be taken out of. So what I want you to understand is this. There's nothing wrong with desiring to get taken out of stress for a while. That's built into us. The key becomes to be taken out of stress in a healthy way. And so let me talk about what then creates healthy rest, healthy taken out of. So there's two necessary ingredients. Number one, it has to be to an activity that is rejuvenating without negative consequences. It's not like drugs where you go, oh, this feels so rejuvenating, and then you get the after effects and it takes you to a worse place. But it's an activity that just puts gas in your gas tank again. It replenishes your fuel supply. It rejuvenates you. And secondly, there needs to be a rejuvenating connection. Connecting with myself, with others, with my higher power. So I've had lots of clients who have said to me, I'm going to have a self-care weekend. I'm going to get taken out of my stress, and I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to sit on the couch all day and just do absolutely nothing. Netflix marathon. Now, at times that might be good. But what happens for a lot of people is they come back from that weekend and they feel worse because they didn't have a healthy connection with anybody. They didn't do an activity that was rejuvenating. And so just doing nothing doesn't mean you're taken out of and you're going to get rejuvenated. You need the right activity and the right connections. And you need to connect with self, others, and your higher power. The next thing that's important to see is you can only find rest when you're in safety. If you're still in an environment of danger, a relationship that's dangerous, you can't let your guard down. And so you aren't able to rest the way you long to rest. Next thing that is important to understand is that rest requires healthy boundaries. If I'm going to rest, I have to say no to a whole lot of people that want my time. And that might not feel real good at times. It might feel mean. It might feel rude to say, sorry, I don't have time to talk. Sorry, I can't meet with you. But if I don't set some boundaries, I'll never have time to rest because there's just too many demands for my time. And so those are important things for me to learn is healthy rest requires healthy boundaries. So if I'm not good at boundaries, I'm going to need to learn boundaries if I'm going to get healthy rest. So what I want you to see is this. In order to be a healthy person, I need the right balance between work and rest. And the purpose for rest is to be taken out of, to reconnect, but also to replenish my tank so that I can work more and be productive. And so I have to begin to figure out that balance. But rest, basically what I'm saying is to be effective in work, to be effective in service, to be effective in loving those that I'm responsible for, I got to take care of myself. And that's not to be selfish. That's just to make sure that my needs are met and that I have energy to give. So this diagram I have found to be very helpful. On the left is unhealthy. On the right is healthy. So on the top are high energy outputs. So complex trauma on the left in the red, you're in survival. You're constantly putting out energy to survive. On the right is healthy. You put out energy in performance. You work, you serve, you help people. Okay? Then on the bottom is the low energy, the rest. And so on the right, you have the performance in the green, but then you go and recover. And you have your rest. You get taken out of that, get your gas tank refilled, and then you go back and you perform again. And you're able to do that for years and years. But on the left, complex trauma, you can't ever relax because you're in survival mode. You got to be on your guard constantly. And so what happens is you push yourself until you burn out. And the only way that your body can find a place to rest is to shut down. And some of you have gone through that. And so the danger is for people to come into recovery and they're still on the left side of the matrix. And so they're still pushing themselves to do recovery. Go, 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 go. Don't say no to anything or anybody and burn out or relapse. And that becomes your rest. And then you get back on your horse and you push yourself again until you burn out again. And so an important part of getting healthy and sustaining recovery is learning the balance between the performance zone and the recovery zone. Learning to be able to give, but to rest. To come out of that for a while and replenish yourself. So, give thought to things that fill your gas tank. But also be aware of things that drain your gas tank. Do you realize that stress, anxiety, depression drain emotional energy? And often for people from complex trauma, they can have those and not even be aware that they're struggling with some of that, and they're just tired all the time. So be aware of what drains your gas tank, and then everybody's different, so what fills my gas tank might be different from what fills your gas tank. What fills my wife's gas tank? She just loves fun and playing board games and cards and all of that, laughing. I enjoy a deeper talk. I enjoy time alone to think. Very different, but everybody's got to figure out what fills your gas tank. So it might be just fun, laughter, time with friends, or a good book, or journaling, or just listening to music, or doing a favorite hobby. And then be aware that introverts being with people too much drains their gas tank. They need time alone to replenish. Extroverts being alone too much drains their gas tank. They need to be with people to replenish their gas tank. So you have to figure out what works for you based on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Let me end with this. This whole topic of rest and work, if you don't figure it out, you don't get very far in recovery. So many people still try to use the old tools. So many people aren't aware of how complex trauma has messed up how they approach work and rest. And they don't do well in recovery. Self-care is part of this. Boundaries is part of this. And so it is a critical, important topic. And I just hope that you are able to take some of these tools and apply them in your own life.